Okay. Tech Packs are due. Episode 17. The official, unofficial, official footwear design podcast. I'm Jake. Caulin is Caulin. We are back, coming off of a hot one.
A white hot episode for sure.
White hot, best yet episode with John Gisbert.
Yeah.
Gisbert. John
Gisbert.
Yeah. So obviously awesome. We can't shout out Ian at Deadstock Coffee enough. We have a future episode planned with him, just so everyone can get to know the man behind the space.
Yeah.
And he was super cool. I mean, unreal, great space.
Yeah.
Just fun
Ian
to be.
has like a super cool story too about, going from janitor to footwear designer at Nike. So
Did not know that.
We will tell that story.
Yeah.
But big shout out to Ian Williams over at Deadstock. If you're in the Portland or Beaverton area, go check out Deadstock. Grab a coffee, grab a water if you don't drink coffee.
Yeah. Just where I was at, I was like, nothing for me. But man, and the space was incredible. Especially that meeting room. It was like, yeah, and to be in like Beaverton, I think it's just like cool to even say like, oh yeah, we're in Beaverton, Oregon, shooting a podcast about footwear.
Yeah. Big deal.
Yeah, super cool. You might have heard a couple times throughout the podcast that we had a bit of a run-in with setting it up. I picked up John at 6:00 in the evening. We got to Deadstock maybe 6:25. So downtown to Beaverton, not that far. We didn't start shooting until about 9:30.
Wow, when you guys said it was late on the interview, I didn't realize how late that actually was. That's crazy.
I will never, yeah. And not only that, I mean, Oregon, Portland is known for rain, but it was like straight downpour rain the whole night, the whole time.
Yeah.
Like I couldn't even see, like I don't know West Side, like I don't know the other side of the river very much. I don't go over there. I don't work for Nike. I don't work for Columbia. I don't work for any of the people on the West Side.
Yeah.
So it's just like, it's just dumping, and I don't know where I'm going, and I'm following GPS. I'm sure John was like, what is this? And, and like, we're good friends, so it's not like, it was fine. But then to like tack onto that, like, a place we've never been to, I'm trying to set this whole thing up, and the whole time, like, I'm setting it up, John's kind of like, are you sure like what's going on here? And I'm like, dude, trust me, like I've shot this a ton.
Trust the process. Yeah.
And so, I mean, I was, setting up mics and putting everything in, and then so I got the whole setup, and then we were like just trying to get the shots right and the angles. Trying to figure out what to do with the sign was just kind of lame. That took probably 30 minutes, like, and it added up. Right. I mean, like, do we use the lights? Do we not use the lights? Do we use the overhead lights? Do we use the thing?
Yeah.
Man, and by the end of it, like, I'm yawning, John's yawning. We're like, we're going to do an hour and a half and then sketch? Like, are you kidding me? Yeah, so, and long story short, like, I think that's why my sketch sucked. Like, people... Like, no one said anything yet, but I know it. Like, I know it in my heart.
Oh,
like,
I think it was good. I mean, big shout outs to you and John for setting it all up and getting it going. I mean, I think everyone can say for like the first official in-person recording, multicam recording for this podcast, like, I think you knocked it out of the park. I think you did a great job. So, Like production value, boom, way up. And so,
Yeah.
2-3 hours of kind of fiddling with it. I know it's tough. But hey, that's kind of like the career path in design sometimes. It's like,
Yep.
it's rough
That's
getting
true.
going, and right when you're there, you're exhausted, but you still kind of have to perform. And so I think the sketches you guys did were really awesome. I haven't seen anything like that
Yeah.
ever in social media, anything. And so it was really cool just to see that back and forth, and like how you guys kind of went from, this triangle, that's what we also talk about, we're all just drawing triangles.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but you kind of scrubbed it out and created this sketch, man. Like, I think you guys did a great job.
Thanks. Yeah, it came around in the end, and so there's going to be a number of upgrades the next time. We've got another like episode of Deadstock coming up.
Mm-hmm.
And so immediately, like, on that setup, I was like, oh my gosh, we've got to get different tripods. I had an iPhone 8. The video quality was absolutely horrendous. Like, I thought I was like in like Flint. I'm like, I found an iPhone super cheap. I'm like, boom,
Let's
iPhone.
go for it.
No. I've told Caulin a bajillion times, they have come a long way since the 8. Like, that's before the X. Remember the X? Like, they skipped 9.
Yeah. The Roman numeral 10. I don't know what I was
thinking. But thanks. Yeah. So like the sketch came together, and it was kind of hard. It was like, it was almost like sketching with like an impediment, because like we had to sit the cameras like right in front of us.
Yeah.
But now that's fixed, so we won't have that next time. But, so I kind of blame that on, like, I was trying to look around there, and then once I got once I got kind of a layout, I was like, all right, now get rid of all of that. Let's sketch over that. Oh man.
But for the listeners at home, if you don't know what we're talking about our latest episode, and go watch it. Just please, go watch it on YouTube. And see the video. Was a big labor of love. Jake put a lot of time and effort into editing it and making sure it was crisp and clean.
Yeah.
And shout outs to John for being our guinea pig, so we can get the first kind of in-person situation going. But yeah, more awesome shots like that to come for sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, super grateful for him for even agreeing to it, pitching ideas back and forth with me, getting on the phone was like super awesome. Yeah, I think that's kind of a quick intro. Oh, and then we broke out the sketch, so we're calling that sketch sesh. We broke that out. That's kind of something that we would say all the time, like, hey, you guys want to get together and do a quick sketch sesh? Which is not exactly rolling off the tongue right now. I have a slight cold, so I'm like trying to say it is a little odd. Sketch sesh.
Sketch sesh. Say it 10 times fast.
Yeah, so it's like we're putting that we're separating the sketch sessions out, so everyone can just like tune in. Don't have to navigate all the way to the end. You can just pop it on, watch them do sketch. It's pretty high level. Oh man, let's just get into it. And I just remembered, let's tack on to the end, talking about John's sketch a little bit.
Yes, for sure. Absolutely.
There's some fun stuff there. Yeah, first off, we want to say again, Caulin already said it, but like and subscribe to the page. Again, I've sunk quite a bit of money into this, but if we can get it big, we can make it better for everybody.
Absolutely.
And who doesn't want an awesome footwear design podcast? I don't know the answer to that. Man, it seems like there's 87 of us who want it. But if you recall, not more than like 7 episodes ago, I was like, Caulin, we got like 40 people. And now we've doubled that. So like, subscribe, tell people.
Share it.
Yeah, share it. If people are wanting into footwear, I hope this is the first place you point them, as a nice reference. All right, let's get into John. John Gisbert, and talk about all of his stories, and talk about maybe a little bit more in depth our thoughts on some of them that we didn't get to. first thing on my list is how does someone go from being a CPA to
Yeah.
to a footwear designer? Like,
That's an incredible journey.
yeah,
You know, I think for a lot of people who have reached out to me, you know, they may be in a similar zone, a similar area. You know, like I had a guy who's an architect, and I feel like the architecture thing is a little bit more of like a understandable leap. You
yep,
know, you're used to building things and drawing schematics and blah blah blah, blah making stuff. Is kind of similar to footwear design, and that those skills can transfer, right? Tinker Hatfield was an architect and then became footwear designer. Virgil Abloh was an architect, became a designer.
yep.
Um, but yeah, CPA, that's like I could not imagine.
Like, how do you? I just don't know how you recognize in yourself that that's what you want to do.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
that you're not, and I wish I could have dug in to this a little bit more because,
right.
and maybe I'll just have him on for a remote, like kind of like follow up
Mm-hmm.
because I just want to like ask him. I didn't think about it in the moment, but like, how did you like? You have to go and acquire some skills, and he
Yeah,
did that with night classes and stuff.
yeah,
But I would have found it like pretty hard because again, people who go there are usually people who have like background in art, or they've
right.
sketched a lot, or they like anime and they sketch things, or like they do characters or whatever.
Yeah,
They have some kind of talent going in.
right.
Whereas he like like where do you find the motivation to just continue? Because it's like it's an ultra competitive career.
Yeah. And I mean, spending money on a degree and then also like certification, spending all this time and money and
Yeah,
effort into becoming a CPA, you know, an accountant is, you know, for a lot of people, the accountant job is like it,
yeah,
you know, like that's, you know, crunching numbers and getting paid to do that
yeah,
is where they want to be. And so, yeah, it would be nice to kind of like dig back in and say, like, what was the impetus? What's the, you know,
yeah,
you just wake up one morning and you're like, forward design, boom.
yeah,
Or is it, or is it like, I mean, I like to think maybe he was, you know, dealing with Adidas all day, every day. He was seeing shoes. And then, you know, he kind of alluded to this, right? That like he's seeing these new things that are like in the, you know, the back room that he's working in as a
yeah,
CPA for Adidas. And he's like, well, who makes these? And then he kind of gets to learn and understand like what a designer does and what a developer does. And maybe these people are explaining it to him and he's like, that's interesting. How do I do that? And
yeah,
then working backwards from there, he kind of alluded to that, but I don't know, you
yeah.
know?
The other thing is, it's one thing to want to do it.
Yeah.
The other thing is he found success.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like nearly immediately, he's able to convince
Yeah.
people, like,
Like
like
he's
I'm
got
good
it.
at this.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and I think, well, which is something I'm kind of jealous of, would be to have a degree in something other than design.
Yeah.
Just knowing college experience, university level experience in anything, you're developing a lot of skills. You're putting a lot of time into some complex concepts
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
become a CPA, especially to work at Ernst and Young. So you
Yeah.
guys don't know that. Maybe like because we're all footwear nerds, we don't get into like high paying jobs and what they
Yeah.
do. But like
Yeah.
there's engineers and like there's a high paying situation. There's a financial group that's very high paid, and
Yeah.
Ernst and Young is like he
Yeah.
said
He
it on
told
his
us it's like the
podcast.
NBA. It's like the
Yeah,
NBA of being a CPA.
yeah, like that's where you want to be. So he's making a bag, and
Yeah.
he decided to do something else. So
Yeah.
but what I'm trying to say is like there's a layer of like thinking that he's already developed. I don't know if all of us have done that could easily translate into like how he thinks differently in footwear.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a level of detail that goes into being a CPA.
Yeah.
there's a level of and then there's analytics, which he got into as well. So there's like
Mm-hmm.
all this stuff that like a normal designer doesn't have,
Mm-hmm.
that he's now like adding into like the mix.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of what Daniel talked about when he came in, like art information. You know, like I consume
Mm.
beauty information. I consume beauty information. My brain remixes them, and
Yeah.
hopefully it comes out
Yeah. On the other
interesting.
side.
This is like next level, where he's spent his whole life developing something else,
Yeah.
and
And
now
then
he's
applying
like,
it.
yeah, now he's like
Well, and
he's got
like,
a whole different bag than most of
yeah.
us.
Well, and that,
Um,
like,
yeah,
that's what I loved about it too. Like when he talked about having kind of this inventor mentality or this
yep,
innovator's mentality, where he talked about like, hey, as a kid, I wanted to be an inventor, which I totally like felt in my heart and my soul, because like that's what I was doing. Like I was in the garage taking apart, my dad's old radio and like
yep,
figuring it out, and like doing stuff and trying to like you know invent things, be an inventor. So like his story just rings true to me too, because I came from comms, I came from communications. Like I have a super unlinear like path to design. And I think that's everyone really. Like even though you went to design school, Jake, and kind of went from design school to making bags to going to Pencil, then Brooks, now Rad. You know,
yep,
that's seems like a linear pathway looking back on it, but it was probably not a linear linear pathway in a lot of ways, right? We've heard from your story that you didn't even know that doing art could be, having an art influenced career could be a thing to
yep,
support a life. um and so I think everyone has that aha moment. It just happens, it depends on when it happens in your life. And so
yeah,
for John, it happened a little later. And for many, so for me, it happened a little later. Um, Obviously, before I had like a career,
yep,
thankfully. So I've been able to build myself into a designer. But that's just even more difficult to already have an established career and then decide, hey, I'm gonna give this a shot and then be really good at it.
yep,
So it
yeah.
just
And
goes to
it's not
show, like, if you have a passion for something and you know that you can deliver, you should go for it.
right. I agree. It's yeah, it is not. It is a non-normal situation. I remember flirting with like, oh, engineering, oh,
Mm-hmm.
maybe, because I didn't, like you said, like I didn't know. And so I remember
Yeah.
like looking at different majors and being like, let's try this. And
Yeah.
I think the thing that stopped me, and John mentioned it too, is like he took calculus and he was like, whoa, this is like I've
Yeah.
always been a good student, but this is different. I had that same experience. And as soon as I looked up, like I had a really close family friend pushing me to chemical engineering, and
Yep.
he was a chemical engineer, and I just saw chemical engineer, giant home.
Yeah.
I was like,
Working for Lockheed Martin.
I was like, yeah. Well, he was working for Exxon Mobil, and I'm like,
There you go.
okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Working for a petrochemical
I'm like,
company.
if I do this, I get that.
Right.
Um, and that's really all I wanted, and that's still in a lot of ways all I want anyway. Is just like a
To
career
have,
that leaves
yeah.
me not stressed, and
Yes.
a payoff being comfortable home life.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what a
But
lot of people want.
as soon as I saw the class list, I was like,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't think this one's
I,
for me.
we should do a little like expose or a whole episode about this, because I feel like every designer has like their flirtatious moment with engineering and then a harsh reality of like, no, actually no,
Yeah.
I don't want to do that. Because I feel like it happened to me, it happened to one of my previous senior designers I worked with. Like he even went as far as to get a degree in engineering and then decided, no, I'm gonna get a master's degree in industrial design instead.
Whoa.
So it's like, I think every designer has that moment where you're like, because they overlap a significant amount, especially when it comes to physical product. You
Yeah.
have to work with an engineer, but an engineer's job is to make sure things work a designer's job is to make sure things work well.
Yeah.
Like in all aspects, visually, user experience wise, like you focus more on the person than the product. When you're an engineer, you're focused on like a lot of the minutia that goes behind
Yeah.
making the product and getting the product, whatever. But the beauty in design is that you get to work with people
Yep.
and focus on people. And I think every designer has that moment. So it's interesting to hear that moment for John. Like we need to dig into that. We got
Yeah.
to get him back on.
Yeah. He'll come back for
Yeah,
sure. We have a lot
for
more people
sure.
to get on, but at some point,
Yeah.
we'll rotate. Speaking of like team,
And
I
people.
think
Yeah.
getting into the samples that he brought, which were excellent, by the way. I think
Oh yeah.
I wish I could turn the camera around because all my samples currently sit behind the camera.
Yeah.
And I'll kind of rotate them through. Like I'll have stuff back here that'll
Mm-hmm.
kind of rotate. But it's like we just kind of keep things that we like
Yeah.
and that inspire us, but maybe they don't hit the market.
Mm-hmm.
I was fortunate. I feel so fortunate to have grabbed a sample of my very first shoe before it got kind of like
Mm-hmm.
rehashed a little bit.
Right.
It's somewhere buried in there, but like you just have these memories with things, and I think that is such an interesting way to introduce like different learning moments as a footwear designer.
Yeah.
So hopefully we can continue that. I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure each of my guests will have shoes
Oh
to lay
yeah.
out on the table.
Yeah.
Um,
We could.
Maybe we'll
I
do
like to
five,
call
six,
them.
maybe we'll do 30. I don't know, but
Yeah.
I just want to like keep that momentum flowing
Well, I
because I
think
think it sparks cool memories.
they are. Yeah. They're kind of breadcrumbs of process. Is like what I like to call them. It's like you can see in a sample, first round, second round, whatever it is, kind of what the thought process was and how it had to change.
Yep.
So to see that for each of our guests is going to be really cool.
Yeah. And specifically, I think when and again, holding the samples too, it's like feels quite a bit. It's a little crazy because it's like surreal to hold an Adidas sample. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
just seems like even as a designer myself, like just like imagining that this is a developing shoe that I'm holding, like this isn't
Yeah.
the final thing was like, oh, it's so cool. Like I'm holding sample grade Boost. Like that's just like
Yeah. Yeah.
the
This came
sneakerhead in me kind
from.
of goes nuts. Like
Yeah.
uh and it was super cool to hold them. And then like I wish everyone could have got a chance to like touch the materials. Like it was like cool,
Mm-hmm.
all of that stuff. But the first memory that like I'm still thinking about, I mean, he talked about like, knowing history, past, present, future in order
Mm-hmm.
to like be able to design, which I
Yeah.
think there's a lot there. I think it's a little like, I think enough's been said on that. So like,
Yeah.
I just think it's an interesting point. The
Yeah.
other one that we didn't get to talk about that was kind of a situation that I have been thinking about for the last week and a half now,
Mm-hmm.
2 weeks even, is like this thought of that he expressed in their originals basketball that like everyone could co-own a project, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and I think I've seen a little bit of that online sometimes where people like tag like like 50 people in like one shoe, one product.
Yeah.
But usually it's like siloed still. Like it's like, oh, this is the graphics guy, this is the developer, this is the plate, this is the blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
He was like literally talking about multiple designers sketching over stuff, and
Yeah.
the idea that the more people who touch it, it's a better idea, which
Right.
you think would be completely true because like if you have one designer doing it, it's like pretty good. But imagine having
Mm-hmm.
like 30 designers, right? Like
Right.
every inch would be kind of like thought through by a bunch of different brains, and then maybe that would bring forth like the best possible solution.
Yeah.
However, it just feels like designers like to be the only designer. That's
It's
been
true
my
that
experience.
there's a little bit of that
Yeah.
kind of like spoils was like the spoils of war kind of like mentality with being a designer sometimes, because it's like this was my thought process, this was my, having ownership over something is kind of unique to design a lot of times. Like
Yeah.
I think the more that comes out about the industry and about how many people touch a shoe, um, the more we give kudos to the people who actually brought it to life. I think about I've got a an old 80s ad of the Air Max 1 right here. I think
Yeah.
the Air Max 1, we like to say Tinker Hatfield designed it. That's great. But also, who are the engineers who worked on how the bubble's going to work in 1987? It wasn't Tinker Hatfield.
Yeah.
You know, who's the one speccing the fabrics and making sure that the factory has the right ones and making sure the color fastness is good and blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
blah. Like all these extra processes. I do agree that it makes a better shoe or a more cohesive product when everybody can take ownership. Where one line starts, you can get into these projects where it's like, I don't know what was mine and what was someone else's. Like I knew what I contributed, but the whole as a group, we created a wonderful product. And I think
Yeah.
with footwear specifically, there's a lot more individual ownership by designers. So I think there's good and bad to both, right? Because
Right.
I feel like we've all been in a scenario where there's almost like this design by committee mentality sometimes.
Yeah.
When you have a big group of people trying to design together, it's like, well, that's not that good.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, let me change it then.
Yeah.
Well, that's not that good. So you have to have the right team dynamic for something like that to work. And it's cool that it worked at Adidas. And that's where he kind of had
Right.
his foundation.
Yeah, I like to say in my career so far, because I think I heard it when I was designing. And I have this desire to like bring like true like industrial design, like studio industrial design
Mm-hmm.
to my footwear projects, like where we collaborate or I ask for feedback and things move along.
Yeah.
Um, but I like to say that I like the best idea to win. Like whatever the
Yeah.
best idea is, like I just want to carry that forward. At the same time, I feel like someone has to drive it. And
Yeah.
if like and I just think like maybe that's why this doesn't exist like anywhere else. Like there was
Mm-hmm.
like this little microcosm in Adidas that was like doing it this way. I
Yeah.
wonder if anyone else is doing it that way. But it's something I haven't experienced because usually what happens is you're assigned a project
Mm-hmm.
and you are the driver. Like,
Yeah. You have to have the vision.
yeah. And it design is usually like at the head, like because no one else is going to draw the shoe. No one
Yeah.
else is going to do all that stuff.
Yeah.
Engineers can do their thing, developers can do their thing, but there's no one that's going to like push the future.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's ideas that will come from elsewhere, but how that's
Mm-hmm.
packaged and offered, it's
Yeah.
like all funneled through the designer. Like,
Yeah. And quite frankly, it's our job, right?
yeah,
To make sure that this, yeah, we're maybe not the ones specking the offset
yeah,
and specking, the thickness and the stack height and whatever, but how it gets packaged, exactly like you said, how
yeah,
it emotionally connects with a consumer, how it emotionally looks on an athlete,
yeah,
the kind of emotions that it evokes, the kind of style that it evokes. It's like you have to own it and you have to run with it. And if you
yeah,
do that as a group, hopefully it works. I think it's very unique.
yeah,
And if you have that group, stick with them. That's awesome. I love
yeah.
that. Um,
No
but you're
kidding.
absolutely right too. Like egos can get in the way. There's a lot of passion and emotion in what we do.
Yeah,
And when you're tapping into that side of yourself, when you're a designer, it becomes, you have to guard yourself too,
yeah,
you know,
yeah. You can get heartbroken. No
very
doubt.
fast. Yeah, absolutely.
And you try your best to separate, but it is interesting. And my thought was like, I just had right now was like, if that's your situation with the different people, co-ownership, I'm like, no, 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 no. Whoever does the tech pack, it's theirs. Like, I feel like some point you gotta like
Whoever puts in
someone's
the
gonna
effort.
have to do
That,
that.
yeah.
And so I feel like it becomes that person's. But I know you hear about stories where like at least I hear about this, where like at Nike, like some people just work on the IRO.
Yep.
Someone will just work on the upper textile. Someone will work on tooling. There's like a vision holistically, but like
Mm-hmm.
pieces are being like owned.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but then there's still, again, there's a lead
Mm-hmm.
driving the decisions. Um, I will say though, it is something that you need to be careful of. Then we can move on to something else. But it is something you need to be careful of, like, because the person doing the bulk of the work, like it's kind of their project.
Yeah.
And I've seen sometimes where I've witnessed like someone taking ownership for a project where they probably gave
15%.
yeah, right. And so I think it's
20%.
something like it's a very cultural footwear thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like to not do false ownership. Like I
It's like
can't
not stealing jokes in comedy.
yeah,
Yeah.
I can't emphasize that enough. Like yeah, if you get up on stage, you should not be doing Seinfeld like
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, man on the moon. Like why do we need a car on the moon? You should not be saying that. That should never leave your mouth. Um but yeah, so I would just like offer that as a caution
Mm-hmm.
for everyone in general. I think I've been down that road where you know, I did the upper, but I didn't do the tooling, and I'm like specific. Hey, like that is
I
not
just
my
did this part.
tooling.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Like I did not come up with that. This is specifically a carryover. Like you
Yeah.
got to be, and if you you can change the rubber, you can do some cool stuff. You can change the finish on the midsole, but like geometry wise, that like I got to be. And you want to also know that too for when you're interviewing for another job or whatever, that you're very clear. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I haven't done a tooling before. I've only done uppers, or I did do toolings in this one, and I, you know, so like the level of expertise you've gained is not muddied.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like be careful. If all you did was the IRO, you probably shouldn't have ownership of the Jordan 23. You know, so like
Yeah. Yeah.
probably shouldn't be doing that. Or like you pick the laces or something, whatever.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, you could
so,
own what you did. You can
yeah,
definitely own what you did in the process.
yeah,
But yeah, I know, like, there's. I'll just tell it some other time. But E has a great story about that. Uh,
yeah. But no, and then we got into Boost You Wear, which is like iconic
yeah,
for John.
and
And
I
yeah,
just when you guys like picked up that sample and you guys were looking at it, I just got a blast from the past because I was working at Foot Locker when that shoe came out, and he exactly kind of encapsulated it like how we were selling it, is that it was like this lifestyle basketball shoe. It's just like looked good. We had plenty of people who were like rocking them for pickup games and stuff like that.
yeah,
They got strong ankles. Like,
yeah.
but yeah, I mean, I couldn't help but remember when he you know picked up that sample, like exactly where I was, just in the University Mall in Orem, working at Foot Locker,
Oh man,
just
you were at
dreaming of the day.
you were at university.
Yeah, University Mall in Orem. You know, while I was at BYU.
What were the years? Because I mean, I might have saw you one time. You know.
No, let's see. I think I started working there in 2016, 17,
Never mind.
2017. You had already left by then, I'm
I'm
pretty
gone.
sure. Yeah.
I'm at Brooks already.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember seeing it on like Brandon Ingram, and I
Yeah.
was like, oh man, that's so cool. And
Yeah,
then
it's like, who
like
does that?
when I saw his picture, his Adidas picture, he's holding them. You know, I was like,
Yeah. The black and white Adidas picture.
oh man, we might flash that up. John won't care, but
Boom,
that
John.
picture is oh, that's legit.
Iconic.
Yeah. Um, Not much else to say about those other than like I really enjoyed holding those samples, like I said earlier, and um, the toolings were crazy. That
Yeah.
one with the EVA kind of caged around with the
Yeah.
boost, I was like, this is. And he was like, "Oh, this was like pushed too far," and I was like, "Oh man, like it doesn't look pushed too far at all."
Yeah, I mean for especially for the time, right?
Yeah,
That's an interesting thing to talk about too, about how you kind of have to be a futurist in
yep,
a lot of brands, especially like in the segment that he was working in for Boost You Wear. You know, he said it's this lifestyle performance
yep,
kind of product. So it's like he's got performance technology, it's got this kind of stuff, but you know, you're really focused on the aesthetic, which is why I think like him moving to Brooks, he was able to make this really cool jump to
yeah,
performance. I wanted to get your like thoughts on that too. Like
yeah,
going from lifestyle performance to performance, like what kind of jump is that really?
yeah. Well, he said something that I thought was really cool. Um, and it's a mindset to have. It also is such a strange mindset to hear from a guy who is a CPA. Like it just and like never graduated with any official design degree, just had classes. Um, he talked about like taking swings, like
Mm,
and
yeah.
figuring out like where to swing, like how hard you can swing in a project, um, and all of that. Which I think is super interesting because I think in each project that you get, I think the longer you're in footwear design, like when I was brand fresh new, I was like, I'm gonna swing it every like pitch. I'm just
Yeah.
gonna try to crank everything.
Yeah.
You learn that that makes life hard on yourself a little bit,
Yeah.
but probably
You
that's
get
probably a
tired.
good thing. It's probably a good thing to have a hard life, like when you first get in and
Yeah. Learn
start
early.
start to kind of gauge, like, oh, like this is where I can get, you know, I can get loose,
Yeah.
on a tooling on this project because I have time or I don't have time. And like you kind of get a sense of what you can do. Um, but certainly I've had situations where you get a range of products and you're like, I probably can't, I really can't swing on a tooling that hard on this project.
Yeah.
I need to put most of that time in the upper, or maybe you're just given an upper. You're like, well, then I'm gonna like, I know this material, so I'm just gonna try to crank it.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's such a good point. Like, but then we talked about, well, you can decide to hold back on some things, but how many
Yeah.
shoes are you going to have over a career? So why not
Yeah.
just like go crazy? But at the same
Yeah.
time, it's like a balance. Like,
Yeah.
well, do you want to stay in the office late every day and like worry about something that might fail anyway, or like you just kind
Yeah.
of get
Yeah.
you get used to like if I'm going to engineer a mesh, unless I like know exactly what's going to go, or maybe I want to push really hard and see what comes back. There's stuff like that. So that was like that thing, but I think it's like I don't. I wish I could have understood what was going in his mind when he first got handed his like bag of projects because he got the Ageal,
Hmm.
then he got the Hyperion, long distance. Oh, of course, he got the Hyperion. Um, for those of you who are listening, I just got a thumbs up bubble. Uh, for those of you who are listening, whatever. Okay. But no, he went to the Hyperion
Right.
Elite Four.
Yeah.
He went to the spike and the long distance spike and the middle distance spike, like the sprint
Yeah.
spike. He
That's
got
a
those
hefty
three
stack.
at the same time.
Yeah.
He's never done a spike.
Yeah.
He's never done a marathon shoe. He's never worked with these runners. So the developer that he had is a runner. Like
Yeah. Top notch. Like,
runs all the time. Like
yeah.
he could like I know the guy like he could do oh man he could plank for something like 5 minutes.
Yo, what?
You can just sit
Unlimited
there,
core strength? That's
just like,
crazy.
just like,
How do you find like something that how do you find something like that out in the office? He's like, guys, check this out.
dude, bro. It's a strange flex, but no, like we were doing stuff like that in the office, like every once in a while.
Eat your lunch off my back.
Yeah, I got time. Like I can do this. Uh, you got like we would do strange things like it was Brooks, man. So it's like everyone wants
Yeah.
to be oh like I love to run. Like we would do like our like bonding events would be like go to a track and run a full lap as fast as you can. And we'll like time
Speed
it.
work
And
Tuesdays.
we'll set up like a official like timer
Mm.
like at a race and we'll bring all that junk out and everyone can just run and you would and they were pretty persistent like oh let's do it like yeah like and you're like ah man like I don't want to run like a full lap as fast as I can.
We're in
I
Seattle.
yeah I did
It's
one.
raining.
Yeah. Well in the summer it's pretty shiny, the sun's
Okay,
shiny
cool.
and all that stuff, but I did one and I like I didn't mess my knee up, but it hurt for a long time. We did like a full 400 like sprint. I mean all
Ooh.
out. And a guy from merchandising like out of the blinders like at the last 100 meters just like I thought I was in pretty good shape and like this guy's like 10 years older than me comes like flying by and I'm
Dude.
like, dude, this is crazy. And he
Whenever
was
I
wearing
huck
spikes and I
That's
was not.
crazy.
Yeah.
Whenever I try to huck it like that, dude, near the end I'm dry heaving. Like
Yeah. Well, we had people who are like, we had one guy who had one of the best VO2 maxes like in the world.
Yeah.
And we're like, oh, run one, run one. He's like,
He's like,
nah, like, I
check it
don't.
out.
They're like, oh, run one, run one. He's like, nah, 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 I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. He finally decides to do it on like the last group,
Mm-hmm.
which is literally everyone who said their time would be like over 90 seconds for a lap or like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah.
over like 2 minutes. So he jumps in with like the slowest people.
Just to
I
look
have
really
a
good.
picture, like
Nah,
a wide
dude.
angle of the track. And he's like here, and everyone
That
else
dude
is like
he did
over
that on
here.
purpose. He did it on purpose. He's like, look how good I look.
And when he comes to across the finish line, everyone's like, I bet you feel good about yourself, buddy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yo, that's so
Yeah.
good.
Anyway, but back to lifestyle to performance. But that's the environment. I don't know what Originals basketball was doing, but I doubt it was going to the track and
Yeah.
running
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
and so there's a level of I mean, man, he's getting thrown into a whole new way
Yeah,
of
especially
thinking.
with athletes, talking to
Yeah.
athletes specifically, like something not to throw it back too much, but like something that what Lee mentioned a lot was like this person is running to feed their family,
Yeah.
right? That puts a different perspective on like how important this is. It's not just, a shoe for your dad to mow the lawn in or whatever.
Right.
Like this is like performance equipment that these runners rely on to make a paycheck. And so like that's a big responsibility, especially like first time 3 out the gate.
Yeah. And he was
This
doing
guy's
things that
insane.
were so interesting too and kind of out of the box. Like one of the spike that he showed, the long distance one, I was helping with the plate. And he was like, well, I kind of want it to look like this. And I would draw stuff. And he's like, well, I kind of want it to look like this. And then I like didn't realize this, but he had like wrapped a whole story about Paris and like this type of flower and like this type of thing. He's like, that's why I want it to grow out. Like I want the plate to kind of do this thing. And then he like would do things like, well, I really want the shoe to be comfortable. Like I want him to like when he's running, like foot fatigue is like a big deal. I'm learning like,
yeah.
he's like having these like experiences. Well, this is really, this is important. And so he bubbled out the foam. If you go back and look, or even look like on the Brooks website, maybe I'll flash it up. Like the plate kind of sits into the foam a little bit, and he kind of like was trying to say like, well, I'm trying to like make him not land on like a hard piece like every step, like trying to
Mm-hmm.
like mitigate these things a little bit. So he still
Nice.
gets the grip, but he gets more of the foam than he would normally get.
Mm-hmm.
Just like stuff like that, where like I just I don't know where that comes from,
Yeah.
but he has this way of like just being so creative,
Mm-hmm.
and just hearing the journey, it's like I still don't connect the dots, but it's maybe that's the only way that stuff like that could have been designed, because I kind of mentioned that like I was slated to kind of be into those projects, and then they were like, well, maybe not.
Yeah.
But my mindset at that point, I was kind of burnt. Like, I
Yeah.
don't think there was any way I would have come up with like that comfortable of a spike.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I mean, he has to listen to athletes. He has to take in all that. It's such a crazy switch that I think you need someone fresh to come in and
Yeah.
do that and
Mm-hmm.
take on these perspectives for the first time. Um, and I love that he like went for it on the upper.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I mean, he went pretty wild, and they definitely, the development and product line definitely kind of honed him back in. But he was really taking shots,
Yeah.
and I think it led to being like a really compelling thing. And again, just like you talk about taking a brand to the next level, he really like,
I
I
mean,
mean, elevated it. Even though I'd
absolutely.
say like the Elite Four got pretty tore up from
Mm-hmm.
reviews,
Yeah. Yeah.
because by the time they're putting that one out, like the running world has already moved into Pipa foam
Yeah.
and
Super
these,
duper soft, like
yeah, like,
10
and
Shore, like, yeah.
it was a little late, but and they're now like just kind of getting there, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
but like aesthetically though,
Yeah. It ushered in this whole new era of Brooks aesthetics.
yeah,
Like,
and there was a lot of computational thing was starting up, and
mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
he was able to like kind of fit that in, like, hey, this goes here, and like
Yeah. Yeah.
he guided that process along. I mean, really, it was to be able to do that and to take all the feedback, and I saw him there late all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
um and 3 projects of that caliber at the Olympics, like you'd think you
Mm-hmm.
want it, and I think
Yeah.
we all think we want that. But I saw the grind, like
Yeah.
so many times I would leave and he was just there, or he would be like, yo, I gotta go. Or he'd be
Yeah.
like, I mean, so many times, I tried to help him out with like line art when I could.
Yeah.
And because I was like, dude, I'm not that busy. Like, do you need anything? Like, just
Yeah.
seeing him range the building, like, and then like disappear and then reappear, and
Mm-hmm.
like it was intense. So, uh, you know, you take
But it
on what you
shows.
take
It
on.
shows. You take on what you take on, but it shows through in the work.
Yeah.
And I mean, even just moving into what you were saying, like Brooks is getting there now.
Yep.
Looking at the Hyperion Elite 5 now. I mean,
Yeah.
that upper is crazy. The midsole tooling is so cool.
Yep.
So like it's tough, but he's knocked it out of the park again, It's
Yeah.
like
It looks like he has spikes coming too. I mean, he's unreal. Like,
yeah.
so yeah, I mean, the Hyperion Elite, like I told him there on the podcast, like, it's never looked better from Brooks. Like, this is,
Yeah.
I mean, like, there are cool shoes that Brooks has put out. Like, I feel like I put out a good one.
Yeah.
Or a good couple. I thought Levitate 2 was pretty sick.
Levitate's pretty sweet.
But like Ghost Max was most of the one I felt like was there, but I mean, and
See it
like,
all the time. By the way,
and
the
the
Ghost Max is
Hyperion
everywhere.
Max 2 was cool.
Yeah.
I did the
that
Max
one was
1, but
sweet.
the Max 2 was like pretty legit.
Yeah.
Shout out Ryder. We did that review early on. That was like the first episode or whatever.
Yeah.
But this one's just
Crazy.
But what I liked about that story was, um, he kind of said, "This is what happens when I have time."
Yeah.
And I was immediately like,
Whoa.
"Oh my gosh!" Like,
So these other ones that you really killed it,
yeah.
you didn't have that much time. Like, oh yeah, great.
He's like, "This is what."
That's like this guy waiting for the slowest group of the pack to go,
Yeah,
and him sprinting past.
yeah, just like that. Yeah, but it's so true though. Like, there's a fine line in footwear between like too little time and too much.
Yeah,
But he definitely had way too little on the first three.
yeah,
Kills it. Then
yep.
he has a nice space of time. Kills it again. It kind of just lets me think like, well, just give this guy like, just give him enough space. You know,
Yeah,
like don't
just
let
let
him
him
just
work.
like,
Yeah,
kick it. But like,
yeah,
give him enough. Like, just poke him. Like, don't like push the pressure down. Like, just let him go.
yeah,
It's something I want to, man, I really hope, I would love to manage one day, but we'll see if that ever happens. But I would love to
yeah,
know like what individuals need in order to get the best out of them.
yeah.
I think I could do that pretty well. That's my interview
You
clip that
heard it
I'm going
here
to send to
first.
people.
If you're looking for a footwear design manager,
Yeah.
but
Um,
I gotta
no, well,
know on the.
actually, a really
Oh, go
good
ahead.
manager told me you don't know what managing is till you fire somebody. And I'm like, oof, okay, never mind.
I'm
um,
good.
anyway, that's a tangent. But back to like HE5,
Yeah, I wanted
I
to
think
know about the bubbles.
everyone's commenting like, "What's the bubbles about? What's the bubbles about?"
Yeah.
Um, literally, I mean, like they had thoughts about like taking out weight as much as they can. So obviously, there's weight there that's getting lost.
Yeah.
But the other one is like, I remember John talking about like, well, if you have two like take two dodgeballs and they're like sitting
Mm-hmm.
on top of each other, like if you push them down, like there's a natural like want to spring
Oh,
back.
yeah,
And he's
yeah.
like, so like, what if we just have like a bunch of those, like pushing
Dude,
down
that's
and
that's
springing
that
back?
almost that like science experiment where you put like a baseball on top of a
Yeah,
basketball and you like drop it and the baseball
yeah,
shoots up. Yeah,
yeah.
that's cool.
That's
That is so sick.
that's it.
No way. And then I love that it has like the little arrows pointing to the plate.
Yep.
Wow, that is sick. I didn't know that. That's so cool.
Yeah, that's the one. That's the story, man.
The weight
Again, another
savings, the
thing.
balls. That's cool.
Speaking of time, if we would have had time in that whole night, maybe I would have got to some of those things. But I
Yeah,
really felt
yeah.
rushed. Like I was shaking. Like I was like, holy crap! Like there's no way he thinks this is legit at all.
Dude, it
Um,
turned out really good, man.
yeah,
Like,
it did.
yeah.
Um, okay, final thing. Two final things. The
Mm,
sketching.
yes.
John's sketch. I'm telling you, because I was there, that is how this man shows up. Like, he turned it around and I saw you know, like lines and color. And I was like, and we kind of joked about it like, oh, like I have to render my thing out, like get
Yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
shadowing and everything. Then I'm
Yeah, yeah,
like,
yeah.
yeah, that's what I've had to do my whole career, man. I was like, I didn't hate it, but I could not stand like he would show up with those sketches all the time,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
no
yeah.
one batted an eye. They were like, "Oh, this is cool," and I'm like, I'm over here pouring render style in the
Yeah,
stuff so I can
into this.
show my PLM, and they're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I get material." Like, "Oh, I see it. I can see it." Like, and so
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
trying to make
yeah.
it look as real as possible. And
Right.
his looked
So
like
this is something that I love
like
because I'm
Indeed. What's her name?
yeah.
Like the architect who just like threw paper and like I was like,
There it
ah,
is. No, like yeah, Frank Gehry. I love
yeah,
talking about Frank Gehry's sketching style because if you look just Google search Frank Gehry sketch
yeah,
and it is just lines. It's just haphazard lines, and I'm not trying to rag on Frank
It's
Gehry. He's
like
amazing.
building.
Yes, building,
Building.
do it, make it.
Yeah.
But this is just, I love that you're talking about this because this just goes to show, like, um, in footwear design, we make shoes. So like, as long as the sketch or the render or the tech pack is in service of making the shoes,
Yeah.
that's what's most important. And
Yeah.
so sometimes it depends on the person, it depends on their style, and it depends on how well you communicate, right? I could see in a world where John, previous CPA, can really communicate his ideas verbally and physically and have a sketch like he's shown and people get it.
Yeah.
Other ways you want to be really, really clear. So like for me, I would over explain. So maybe Jake, you're over explaining through sketch, and that's just kind of how you've learned to do it. And people like that aesthetic and that style from you. Like
Caulin,
even you,
lean back central. Yeah, stay center on the shot, buddy.
even you like to say that your sketch on the sketch sesh wasn't perfect, but like I thought it was really good. Like for 10 minutes, you guys, busted out some really cool concept sketches. And that's another thing too, is right. Like there's a difference between a concept sketch where you're just trying to like work things out and like a full scale, like sit down and render it, make it realistic kind of sketch. So I mean, that's my thought process.
And when I think about, like, again, he was sketching on the Agile, which that was like his first project.
Yeah.
Like that was the amount of time he had. Like he was just like boom, 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 boom. And like, just like trying to rip them out and be like, what do you think? And then he would go. And it was very effective at the end of the day. But like, that was the thing that like just would blow my mind. And I was working with him and I'd watch this. He would do that. And then when he knew he had a meeting coming up, he would show up with a rendering of the shoe. And I'm like, where has this been? Like, and then like the vision was like ultra clear. Like I was like, I'm like, so this guy's going from this to this. And I'm like, that's what he's seeing. And like, he would do the same thing for the bottom. Like when I was working on the bottom with him, he'd be like, I don't know. I don't know if I like dig this line. Like, can you change it up? And I would do like a bunch of bottoms for him. I'd give it to him thinking, okay, like maybe he's going to use this as is or whatever. I don't know what he's going to do with it. And then he would render it and be like, oh, like, well, dude, if I would have saw that earlier, like I would have changed this around. It was like, to me, it like was like so like not backward, but kind of. I was like, man, like how is this guy getting away with this? Like, but that's innovation, and the people in that. Again, it's also some of the people, because the people in that were able to see beyond the lines. Anyway, just to say, put the context behind that sketch he did. Like that's how he shows up. I'm saying that's not how everybody can show up. That's how he shows up, because there's a backlog of information that people can reference and understand.
Track record is different than,
I was like, and when we turned our things around, I'm like, man, maybe I should simplify a little bit, but I don't know. I like doing so cool.
There's something to keep things quick and dirty, and I think that's the beauty of a sketch sesh, right? Is like, you have different hands, you have different styles, you have different backgrounds. And if anything, like this episode with John really just goes to show that like your entire being, your entire life, your upbringing, everything influences and informs what you do right now and what you're doing in the future. And so how you package that, just like how you package a brief for a shoe, is you as a designer. And so however you show up, be ready to take some swings, be ready to scrub it out and get something made.
Yeah, absolutely. And he did. His tech packs are crisp. He definitely knew how to get things made, which, again, just like watching that front, like front end to back end it's just fun to like say I worked with a guy like that. And
Yeah, and get to see that
yeah,
perspective. Like I
but
got to do that a little bit at Purple, but it was like me and the same two dudes every time doing a sketch session. So like it was really cool to see.
yeah, so it's great, and I hope people get it. Like again, that's like one of those things where we've had that vision for a while, and now we're starting to get it going.
Yeah.
So there's gonna be more of that. All right, so that's it for this episode. But next episode, Colin and I are going to jump in. We have some stuff happening. There will be another sketch session next week, and then there'll be a break week.
Yep.
Yes, and then we will have another guest.
Ooh,
And
stay tuned.
she is baller.
Yeah.
And so just buckle up. We got a lot planned, but we will be back. Like and subscribe. Tech Facts are due. I am Jake.
Caulin.
Colin is Colin. And yeah, we're excited for all that's coming down. Stay with us. Believe in us as we keep laying this down. Brick by brick. I'm in the garage now. I'm a little cold, but this is the permanent site of the pod, and it's just going to go up from here. So have a great weekend. We will talk to you soon. See ya later.
Peace, guys.